things. I think we probably lost a lot of people who were trying to solve this problem, but hopefully all's
Yeah,
well.
well,
That
hopefully they'll
ends
come
well.
back.
We will
You
get
know,
it. We
it's
will get it
for
for.
those of you who are wondering. I mean, that the system for broadcasting live across multiple streams like this is kind of held together with spit and baling wire, and um, it's evolving positively every few months, but it's still kind of a glitchy system. Um,
Yeah. So, hello to everybody who's out there watching. We're coming to you live on Facebook in the What's This Bird group. We are also on Twitter slash Periscope and YouTube. So if you're following along on any of those mediums, give us a shout. We're happy to talk birds, talk bird ID. If you have any questions, please feel free to let us know in the comments, and we will take them as we go. As usual, what we do is that we pull some interesting images, some interesting discussions, birds that have prompted some cool discussion in the ABA's What's This Bird Facebook group. If you're not familiar with that group, it is a crowdsourced bird identification community. You can throw your images, your cell phone shots, your nice photos, whatever you got, up into that group if you want to know what the bird is that you photographed, and we'll try and do our best to get that bird identified for you. We have a lot of really great regulars and a really wonderful team of moderators and admins to keep that going. If I'll introduce myself, if you don't know, you can see in the little name down there. There's it over here. My name is Nate Swick. I host the American Birding Podcast and do a lot of the social media here at the American Birding Association. I am joined by my colleague Greg Neise. He does the web mastering. He's the master of the web here at the American Birding Association. Yes, knuckles cracking and all. And we are here to chat birds.
yes,
But
we are.
before we get going, maybe we can talk a little bit about this is kind of the doldrums of the year, at least to my mind. Greg, I don't know if that's the way it is up in Chicago where you are, even down here in the southeast. It's a
It
little
is.
slow. It's a little
It
slow
is,
this
but
time of year.
this winter has been and we're in the waning days of meteorological winter here. And as far as the birds are concerned, March 1st is the beginning of spring, and when the weather broke in the last couple of days, boy, the cardinals and robins and everybody else, they really knew it,
Yeah.
and suddenly they're singing and acting all feisty and territorial, and it's good to see and good to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say the same thing. The Cardinals just absolutely blown up in my neighborhood. The crows are back making their especially weird breeding season noises. Carolina wrens are singing very loudly, and the red-shouldered hawks, my neighborhood red-shouldered hawks, have been getting frisky as per the season. So spring is in
Yeah.
the air, even if in other parts of the continent it's still slow getting there.
Well, and I mean, it's an absolute shame and travesty what happened in Texas this week, but last week. But now, from what I've seen in the weather reports, they're up in the 80s.
It's Texas for
I
you.
mean, talk about a shock to the system. Go from
Yeah, I imagine so. It's
freezing pipes to air conditioning in the span of a week.
Well, that's living in the South. We've got that here.
Yeah.
It was 70 degrees here in North Carolina yesterday, and we're back down in the 50s today, which is a little more typical for the end of February, beginning of March. But spring will happen down in this part of the country. It feels like it happens overnight. We go from no trees to fully leafed out in about a week and a half. It feels
Yeah.
like. So, yeah. But welcome everybody following us along in the various social
Well,
media platforms. If you have any questions about birds, please shoot them in the comments. We'll take them.
Yeah, and
try to
it's
see it.
the cold weather in the South, and in particular Texas. There could be some. Well, there already has been some really interesting birds showing up in South Texas. Multiple golden crowned warbler, multiple blue bunting, and these are kind of expected vagrants, and multiple crimson collared grosbeak.
They're in numbers that are unexpected, though. I think that's
But they're
probably the
not
weird thing.
exactly, and that that could be a harbinger of what's to come. And I'll bet with the cold temperatures reaching down into the mountains of northern Mexico, south of Texas, that there's something stunning like a wood creeper or a motmot just waiting in Benson or
Toucan.
someplace else, or a toucan waiting to be found.
We've been waiting for that first ABA area toucan for quite some time.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So, as I said before, what we usually do is grab some of our interesting bird images that have been shared on the What's This Bird Facebook group in the last few days. And
Yeah.
Greg has selected some very interesting birds this time. Let's jump right into it, Greg.
Yeah, so we are in. This is
Oh,
the first
all right.
the first
I'm a
one.
little laggy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I picked this bird. I think a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, I know what that is," right off the top, because there's a lot of. It's a pretty easily recognizable bird, but what the heck is going on with the wing?
Yeah, that's weird. So there's a lot of things that stand out to me. First is obviously that giant white wing stripe. But if you start looking a little bit closer, you see things that perhaps look a little more familiar to us. It obviously is an all black bird with kind of a conical bill that is still pretty long, and that red on the wrist, the red on the shouldery wrist area. And of course, you can see that the birds behind it are perhaps more typical of the species, make it a red-winged blackbird. But red-winged blackbirds frequently have a lot of plumage abnormalities, as anyone who has looked for a yellow-headed blackbird in the midst of a giant red-winged blackbird flock will know.
And I put this one in there just to sort of discuss, just for a quick moment, what is up with that white wing panel on this bird. And some people call it leucistic or partial albino. There's a lot of different things people call it. I tend to call it pigment challenged. This bird has
nice general term.
feathers that are lacking pigment, and we see this in a lot of birds, a lot of different species. And when you're faced with a bird like this, you've got to go back to structure and other field marks and just sort of discount and disregard the plumage abnormality. And I'm reminded of many years ago, I found a female lark bunting here in Chicago, and the person who was in charge of the hotline at the time questioned maybe it was a leucistic female house sparrow. Now, on the surface of it, but it could be, but those two birds are really nothing alike, except in the fact that a female house sparrow with abnormal white patches is kind of the same vague color pattern, could be the same vague color pattern. So you have to discount that piebald effect.
Yeah, generally generally you discourage people from making identifications of birds based on a single field mark. So if you see one weird thing, and alternately, you don't want to discount an identification because one thing seems very weird. So sometimes this happens in What's This Bird pretty frequently. People will post a bird and be like, oh, well, it's hanging out with red-winged blackbirds. Check. It looks like a red-winged blackbird if you ignore the big white thing. Check.
Yep.
But it's got a big white thing. It can't be a red-winged blackbird. Well, you can ignore single field marks when focus on the whole kind of gestalt, the whole feel of the bird, and you're going to be right more than not. You can be able to trust yourself a little bit more. And blackbirds seem to show this a lot. I don't know if they're particularly prone for this sort of plumage abnormality, but it's pretty common actually. And as I said, in a big flock
and
of
robins,
big flock of
American robins show this.
Yeah,
show
crows
it
too. Interesting thing about black feathers, the reason, so white feathers tend to be much weaker. So the melanin that is actually in the bird feathers strengthens the feathers. So the birds, black feathers tend to be much stronger than white feathers, which is the reason why so many birds that are largely white have black tips on their wings, because that makes those outer primaries much stronger. And those are the ones that are having to deal with the force of flapping. So, I feel bad for this blackbird because those white feathers are going to wear a lot faster than the black feathers would, and hopefully, sometimes is the case with these leucistic birds. Like the white will only show up in one molt cycle, so it'll lose those, and then it'll pop back up, and they'll be normal again.
Yeah.
It's really strange how that can manifest in birds sometimes.
Okay, so if you lost track of what this bird actually was in all of that, it is a male red-winged
It is a
blackbird.
lark bunting. I'm sorry, it is a
No,
red-winged blackbird.
no. Okay, our next up is from the Mississippi River in Illinois.
Yep. Yep.
And we have what appears to be a very large bird standing on the ice.
Yes.
And it has short legs and a massive body. And even though the picture is kind of distant, we can still see it's got a big hooked bill. So this
Indeed.
is a bird of prey.
Yep. It's kind of long neck. It's kind of stretched. It's craning its neck, lest you think that this might be an abnormal Canada goose sitting out on the ice. But it is, as Greg says, a bird of prey with the shorter legs and the massive hooked bill.
Yeah.
When I see a bird of prey out on the water, out on the ice like this, frequently habitat is the sort of thing that is really driving my identification for the most part. You're thinking about what birds you're likely to see in given places and given situations, and a large dark raptor sitting on ice in a large body of water always says bald eagle to me.
Yes.
But it's a large brown bird, and we also have another big brown eagle here in North America that you might confuse it with.
We do. And, as Nate was saying, just to back up for a second, that immensely bulky shape is indicative almost always of an eagle.
Yeah.
Other birds of prey, even that you might find on the ground, they just don't have the heft of an eagle.
Yeah. Like a vulture. Vultures will frequently sit on the ground, but obviously that big
they're
blocky
slimmer
head is, yeah.
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 But as Nate was intimating there are two eagles, and in certain plumages they are both brown, like this bird is. So what I've done here is I have photoshopped in a golden eagle to the right of the bald eagle on the left. And
Yeah, when you sent me these images, Greg, and I was scrolling through them, taking a look at it, it's like, wow, how convenient that both of these birds are sitting in the same place. They actually did a really nice job with this, although the golden eagle is a bit sharper, you can tell.
yeah. And I actually did blur the golden a little bit to make it match.
There you go.
But you can see here, just as Nate mentioned, used the word gestalt earlier. Note the head size and bill size of these two birds, and the golden eagle has a smaller head and a smaller bill, and also you can see the golden nape on the golden eagle to the right, which it has in all plumages. And when you get them out on the ice like this in good light, if that did happen to be a golden eagle, you would see that. But
Yeah.
going back, look at the shape of these two birds and how different they are. And
Yeah, I mean the golden eagle, you can tell it's got that smaller head and the smaller bill. Bald eagle is just such a bulky bird. I mean, they have massive head and a massive bill, which makes sense. I mean, these are different genera of bird. They are not necessarily that closely related to each other. The bald eagle
No.
is in the group that is known as the fish eagles, along with white-tailed eagle in Eurasia and stellar sea eagle in East Asia. They're all massive birds with big heads and big bills and kind of stocky legs. And whereas golden eagle is in the Aquila eagle genus, widespread in the old world, much more slender, much more graceful, tend to be booted. They're booted eagles, so the feathers go all the way to the top of the foot, or the top of the toes actually, but we call it the foot.
and you can kind of see that here.
A little bit, yeah. I was going to say that is probably pretty accurate, but the size of the head and the shape of the head and the bill is the main thing here. And as you said, Greg, the golden nape on the golden eagle, whereas the bald eagle, especially these first year birds like this, are very much all over that kind of deep chocolate brown, all over pretty much from bill to tail.
So Chris Ortega asks about the posture of the birds, and no, that's just happened to be the way that that they were standing in the pictures.
That's how golden
and
eagles sit on ice.
In the amount of time that I had
don't
to
think I've
find
ever
a
seen one of
golden
those.
eagle to compare to this bald, that's the best I could do.
Yeah.
And again, one other thing that I was just going to mention is, the bald eagle on the left looks like it's wearing capri pants, and if you can see that, that is fairly indicative of bald eagle.
And while you do occasionally see them in similar places, bald eagle almost always going to be near a body of water, especially this time of year. And golden eagle is much more upland bird. Here in North Carolina, where I live in the eastern part of the state, we do have a few golden eagles that hang around every year. And every time people report like golden eagles out over the sound or out over the ocean, I'm like, are you sure
Yeah.
about that?
Well, now,
Indian
in this
bald
particular
eagle,
case,
which we have a lot of either.
in this particular case where Susan photographed this bald eagle on the northwest corner of Illinois on the Mississippi River, does happen to be the very best place in the state to find golden eagle.
Oh, there you go.
But anyways, that isn't one. So onward.
Onward and upward, like a soaring bald eagle.
So this is something that happens that people post photos of in What's This Bird a lot.
Yeah, I always
And
ignore these, Greg. I'll be honest. I hate identifying feathers.
I find it a really cool challenge, because when you're forced to pay attention to the pattern of individual feathers, you learn something completely new that just kind of sticks in your head. But it's hard.
Aside from a flicker, like I'm not gonna guess.
But what?
Always can get a flicker.
But looking at this picture of this feather, we can get a very good idea of how big it is because of the person's thumb. It's in Texas, so Texas has one of the largest state lists of or province list of any in the ABA area. So we got a lot of birds to choose from. But this combination of that rusty with a white tip, this is a boldly patterned feather, and if you can extrapolate that the ones that would be next to it are patterned similarly, we're talking about a bird with a bold pattern. And what else can we tell about this feather?
Boy, I don't even know where to start on feathers, because the patterns that we think of on wings or tails that are such useful tools for identifying birds, like sometimes get really muddled on feathers, and so it's really hard for me to make the switch in my head. It's like, identifying a forest versus identifying a tree.
We can
I'm
tell
not good at those either.
if we just take a moment to look at bird anatomy drawings where they show the open wings, we learn that the wing feathers and tail feathers are shaped very they're unique. So the primary feathers are shaped differently than the secondary feathers on the wing, and the tail feathers are yet differently shaped. And because of the way the quill of this feather is sort of out towards the edge on the right side, and the general shape of this feather. Yeah, Scott Heron, just don't give it away for us, please. And we can see that this is a tail feather, and so Scott there jumps me now to the next slide.
See, I would have called this either a tail feather or a secondary. The inner.
Right, and those secondary feathers, the quill is more towards the center.
Okay.
They look more like the inner. They look more like the inner tail feathers. This is an outer tail feather of a killdeer.
Yeah, I would not have guessed that.
Well, I mean, it's American kestrel, killdeer. It's not a mourning dove. And you think of birds with a fairly big tail that have big white spots on the tail. Totally. Well, this is a killdeer, and the reason I brought this up is to introduce people who don't know about the feather atlas. And if you get on Google and just type in feather atlas, it'll be the first thing that you come to.
Scott left a link.
Yeah, I see that
in the Facebook stream. Yeah. Oh no, it's really cool. What they've essentially done is taken all the feathers of birds from specimens in museums and scanned them. Put them in a scanner and you get the front and back, and you see them all. It's actually a really cool resource. but I don't
It is,
usually,
and
as much as I
it's
should.
neat to just kind of go through there and look at the wing patterns and stuff of common birds that you're very familiar with.
Hmm.
Things like woodpeckers and that have bold wing patterns,
Yeah,
and you might be surprised at the individual pattern on the feather that creates the look, you know,
yeah.
of the gestalt of the wing or the
It's
tail.
like those George Seurat paintings, the pointillist, where it's
Yes.
like all little dots of paint and they turn into a picture of people in a park. I
So
do have a
that's
question.
yeah.
I have a question from YouTube. Reserve121 asks, "Do you have a favorite field guide you like to use?" They have several and don't really stick with one, but I'm looking for one that is best for taking on walks. They do use apps. What do you think, Greg?
Well, I my quick answer for that question is always Sibley Guide to Birds. And
Hmm. And it
if you're
comes in
going,
Eastern and Western if you want to bring it
ex-
across on walks.
yes, if you want a smaller version to take with you, the one that spans the entire ABA area is quite well. It's always sitting here on my desk. It's a
Shelf there.
hefty book. You could hurt somebody with this. Um, but there are Eastern and Western versions of it, so you could get the smaller one to take with you on walks. But if I was going to carry one book with me, that's what I would carry.
But fortunately, we don't have to have one book. So I use the app as well. I have the Sibley app on my phone.
Or the
I
Sibley
use
app.
the
Yep.
app. I use the app and the actual physical field guide in different ways. I try not to take field guides into the field with me. I use them for at-home reference, at-home studying, in the car. I don't like carrying them on me. And when I'm in the field, I will use the app version, which I usually use to kind of. So I've done my homework. Ideally, I've done my homework with the field guide, and then I go out in the field and I use the app to kind of remind myself of certain things, not as a tool to like flip through and try and find something. So I try and
Well, and
familiarize myself with the birds that I'm likely to see, and then use the app as a tool to kind of get you over that little
Well, and
extra
the
thing.
app has some really cool features that the books don't have, and that is that
Mm-hmm.
you can put two species side by side in the app
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
to compare, and you can scroll through them individually in the app window, and it also has sound files.
The
So
sound
if your
files are
bird
the
is
key thing.
calling or singing,
Yeah.
you can reference the sound file directly there in the app as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've had this mobile technology for not quite 15 years now, and I don't think we have had yet like that definitive app that uses the technology in the way that like a field guide doesn't. Most of the bird apps you find, with the exception of Merlin, which does things slightly differently, which is what makes it so interesting,
Yeah.
are basically just the guide on your phone, which is cool and useful, but I feel like there's still that perfect marriage of the technology and the information has not quite happened yet. Maybe we'll see it. Maybe we'll see it soon. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
and
it's
I
going to
mean,
require a
and
totally different way of thinking about how we identify birds.
yeah, and I think the Sibley app has done, or the Sibley has done a really really good job of getting a a good way there.
Yeah,
If,
yeah, and
for as a reference guide to
yeah,
carry with you.
yeah. The things I like about the Sibley guide are the same things I like about the Sibley app for the most part. I
Yeah,
mean, I like the Sibley guide. I think it's a great field guide. It's very useful. But I have a ton of field guides. I like all the major North American field guides on my shelf, and
yeah. Those are
check them all
almost all
out.
field guides back there.
Yeah, yeah. You don't have the great thing about it at home is you don't have to rely on just one. You can use as many as you want. And
Yeah.
I do frequently.
Okay.
Get a different perspective. Yeah, let's move on to the next bird
This is a
image.
stunning bird. This is a stunning bird, and it's a beautiful photograph. And a lot of people when they see this picture are like, "Oh my God, what is that?" Now it's a very common bird. In we're looking at a moment in its plumage,
Mhm.
and of course an interesting pose.
So this bird reminds me of how the sports teams go to like black uniforms with the trim of like their regular colors, just because I don't know, people like black uniforms. I don't particularly like
Mm-hmm.
them, but this is what this bird reminds me of. It reminds me of like a black Lakers jersey, like the purple and the yellow one.
Yeah.
Anyway, um,
Now, if you remember back to what Nate was saying about the very first bird we were looking at here today, we see the same thing. We've got that sharp conical bill, that kind of long, sharp conical bill, an overall black bird. We see some red on the shoulder there. So we've got a lot of clues, but boy, the back pattern and what we're seeing on the rest of the
that's
bird
cool.
is just
Houndstooth.
it's stunning, yeah. And so what we're seeing here is a red-winged blackbird that is transitioning into breeding plumage. And I'm
Yeah,
not
this is a
sure.
very classic late winter, early spring look at this species,
Yes.
which is not well documented in field guides for the most part.
Over the course of the next few weeks, the bird will lose that pattern on the back and be the familiar blackbird with a red and white epaulet that we're all used to. But for this period of time right now, a lot of them look like this, and it's
So
worth
this
going
is
out to seek them out because they're really cool looking.
so that kind of chestnut color is actually the edges of the feathers. So it's like the
Right.
tips of the body feathers, and as the spring wears on, that those tips will wear off. Like they'll
Right.
break off just because the bird is digging through. You know what blackbirds do. They like to walk around in marshy bogs and slip through tangles. And over the course of whatever the next 6 weeks or so, those tips will wear off, and then we'll have the nice, beautiful, glossy plumage that we associate with red-winged blackbirds. And the reason they do this is so that they don't have to. They can essentially have like starter plumage that doesn't mess up their really nice breeding plumage, that the kind that they have when they're sitting up on top of the cattails singing the song and trying to attract the females. They don't want to look all nasty there. They want to have that kind of those edges pre-made on their feathers so that when those wear off, so they can wear those off so that their real nice, breeding plumage will be pristine.
And birds, and they will also wear those off intentionally preening. As they preen their feathers, you watch them. They work them and they work them, and that excuse me, assists in what we call coming into breeding plumage.
Yeah. I have another question.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of questions on YouTube. YouTube is the place. Hello.
Hey, right on. Hello,
birding
YouTube.
YouTubers. Javier Guitry, I apologize if I butchered your name. He says, "Do you have any tips for finding morning/Connecticut/McGillivrays warblers?" No.
Boy, yes, I do.
I usually just run into them because I'm lucky.
Well, the number one tip is to learn their song. So if we're talking about spring or summer, but spring, they're quite vocal, and if you learn their song, you'll have an edge.
That's morning.
Yep.
Chirp.
And in terms of Connecticut warbler, well, the best place to see Connecticut warbler in the United States and Canada happens to be the Chicago lakefront the last week of May.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say Cape May in the fall is another good place too. But yeah,
Or
you wanna see
yes,
something nice, Chicago. So they have that oblong migration where they go north up the middle of the continent and then they migrate south, kind of on the edge. They go to the shore up around New Jersey and the kind of the Mid-Atlantic, and then they jump off out of the ocean and fly over the ocean all the way to North and South America in one go. So they kind of stack up on New Jersey, and Cape May is set for migrants just because of the shape of the peninsula. But yeah, Montrose has increasingly...
I mean, if you come out to the Chicago lakefront between May 18th and the 25th, you're almost guaranteed to find a Connecticut warbler in one of the parks along the lakefront. And sometimes at places like Montrose, it can be multiple, 3, 4, 5 of them.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. But people always ask about those birds because they tend to be very skulky.
They are
It's a
skulky.
genus. I guess the mourning and McGillivrays are Geothlypis now and not Operonis. But
Yeah.
they're skulky. They're difficult. They like to hang out in really nasty tangles. When I've seen mourning warbler in the spring here in North Carolina, they typically like those kind of raspberry brambles, like just really impossibly thick stuff. And if you're lucky enough that they're singing by the road, you can see it. But otherwise, like no
And
one's going out
Connecticut
into
even
those
more
places.
so than mourning.
Yeah,
Mourning
yeah,
tends
they can be
to
tough.
show itself a little bit more than Connecticut.
Hmm.
And McGillivrays, pretty much same thing, just out
Same sort of
west.
thing.
Um,
Yeah, I think McGillivrays of the three is probably the most reliable. But I was just chatting about this on Twitter today. Because we were talking about honorific names and what's another good name for McGillivrays. But the French name for it, essentially, and the German name as well, most of the European names translate to thicket warbler, which is
yeah,
appropriate given the habitats that they prefer.
absolutely, absolutely. All right, I'm going to move on here.
Yeah,
This is a fun one
Dukes.
because
Let's talk Dukes.
as what would Ted say about this? Uh,
Why are these ducks, Greg? Why are they
Well,
birds and not
they're in the water.
salamanders?
They're in the water, swimming on top of the water, and they don't have fur, so they're not beavers. But what's neat about this is that we see
So
two distinct types of ducks here that basically have the same pattern and color. They
yeah, they're very
basically have
similar.
gray. They have gray bodies and brown heads and white necks, and so but they're obviously very different.
Yeah, one is very long and low, and the other is a bit more squat and ducky, if I may,
Yeah.
with a short, rounded bill and a big round head and kind of a cute expression.
So looking at the five birds in the back there, we see that kind of long orange bill that looks kind of spike-like in this picture. And of the ducks we have here, that is a good field mark for mergansers, which are fish-eating ducks. And if you get a good look at that bill, it's got little serrations like teeth on it,
does.
so they can grip fish.
Mergus serrator is in
Yes.
fact the scientific name for red-breasted. Is it red-breasted? I think
That's
common is Mergus mergus.
Yeah, that sounds right. And the other thing we see here is that the head pattern on those mergansers is sharp and clean. They have that little white patch on the lower cheek there, and the neck the neck and the head color is very distinct. In a red-breasted merganser, which is not what these are, the head and everything would be much more blended together. It doesn't have these sharp
Mussy
pattern.
muddy,
It doesn't have this sharp pattern of these common mergansers, and these are all females.
Yep.
The male
Yeah,
is
in
quite a
fact-
stunning bird.
Especially this time of year. This is as Rosemary Moscow of Bird and Moon Comics calls it, weird duck season, which is the time of year when all the ducks are looking their best and frequently doing extremely odd things. This is pair bonding season for ducks, and a lot of them have really interesting displays.
Duck courtship is, if you
It's
go
a
out to your
trip.
local ponds or harbor and just sit back and watch them go at it, it's a trip because they do all kinds of weird things and they make weird noises. Which
I love watching buffleheads this time of year with the little
yeah.
bobby thing.
Oh, wait, how do they do that, Nate? Can you do that again?
You have to do the face thing. That's really important.
Okay. So the birds in front, the four birds in front, are interesting because you look at them and they're basically the same, but they're kind of different. But that gray body with the brown head and the kind of thickish bill, these are female common goldeneye.
Oh, they have golden eyes too.
And they have bright golden eyes. And but the bird on the right is a young male, and you can see that the bill is a bit bigger and darker, but it's got a little bit of white coming in on the face there. And the other three appear to be females. Now, the one bird in the front, if you look closely, appears to have an all yellow bill. which would be a field mark of Barrow's goldeneye. And looking at the head shape on that bird and the
I
bill
think the head
size,
shape looks right.
I think the head shape looks okay for common,
Yeah,
and the
I would
bill
agree with you
size
on that one. Yeah,
and
the
the
bill
bill
looks awfully
size and
big.
everything looks okay for common.
Yeah, we've been
And this
waiting for
time,
our first state record Barrows goldeneye down here in North Carolina for some time. And because they are found up in Massachusetts, like that is one
yeah,
of the places where you can find a Barrows goldeneye on the East Coast. And um, yeah, there are a handful of female common goldeneyes that you can find that have the entirely orange bill, which is, I wouldn't say that's the field mark. We've talked about don't hinge your identification on the single field mark. It's usually more of a starting place when you are trying to identify a Barrows goldeneye from a
hmm
common goldeneye. It's like the first thing you'll notice, and then you go like, oh well, moving on from here, what makes it a Barrows goldeneye?
yeah. And I'm looking at that bird on the larger screen over here to my left, and
You're
yeah,
gonna tell me it's a Barrows goldeneye?
well,
It's
I'm
interesting.
kind of. It is interesting. I hadn't paid
It's
attention
interesting.
to it before, as I was just focused on the difference between the mergansers and the goldeneyes, and just pointing out the similarities but differences between the two. But yeah, I'm gonna have to take a closer look at that bird in front. The more I look at it, the bill shape is kind of a little wider than it is long, a little bit.
I would like to see more photos, Greg. I
I
think
would
this
like
is
to see more
ambiguous at
photos too.
best.
I think so too. I think so too, because common goldeneye this time of the year certainly can have an all yellow bill. So that's a field mark that's kind of not as trustworthy, um, right now.
But it is interesting you point out that that male goldeneye there on the right. That the shape of the head for the male and the female goldeneye is frequently quite different. The male goldeneyes have that big triangular head.
Right.
It's actually pretty unique. If you see them in profile, even at a very long distance or backlit, that shape of the head is a really useful way
Yeah.
to identify a goldeneye.
And a longtime friend of this broadcast, John Pushok, chimes in from Seattle. That is not a Barrows. So he lives in the land of Barrows goldeneyes and
knows.
sees them all the time. So
Bushy would know.
I will take that. I will take that as golden.
Common. They're both golden.
Common goldeneye. These are all common goldeneye. And so now moving
Bridget,
on, we've
Bridget
got
Butler on YouTube says, "Tell me more about shapes for Barrows versus common." Yeah, when we're looking at that thing, so usually the first thing you notice is the bill that is all yellow rather than bicolored, and if I really wanted to see a Barrows goldeneye, I would want to see that classic head shape, which frequently is very kind of
yeah.
the head is kind of flat. It's like the angle between the bill and the forehead is actually pretty obtuse.
The bill is
Whereas this one's a
stubbier.
little rounder. Yeah,
The bill is stubbier. It's generally yellow with orange, with a distinct orange tinge to it, especially this time of year. And then the head has kind of a mane in the back. There's more going on in the back of the head than there is with common goldeneye. And the gestalt of all of that, it gives you a really different impression. So you've got this bird that's got kind of a mane and a short bill and a high forehead. So it altogether it gives you a very different look.
Yep. It's a tough ID though. Can be,
It is a tough ID,
especially if you're trying to turn a common goldeneye into a state first Barrows.
absolutely. So here now we have what we can see on this picture, a hooked bill. It's a largish bird. We can sort of guess. So we'll just dive right in and say this is a hawk. I think most people would look at this bird and say that's a
Not
hawk.
woodpecker.
It is not a woodpecker,
A goose.
despite the checkered plumage.
Interesting.
But boy, this is a really striking looking bird.
Yeah, so we probably want to break it down into which genus of hawk it is. So when we're looking at different hawks, there are two major ones. There's the buteo or buteo or however you want to pronounce it. I don't think it really matters that much. Which are kind of big and bulky, long-winged birds with relatively short tails and accipiter. which are the forest hawks with the shorter, rounder wings and the long tail. We can tell by the wing to tail ratio. Is that the word I'm looking for? I don't know if it is, but you can see that the wings are very long on this bird. They reach almost to the tip of the tail, whereas in an accipiter they would be coming up short of the base of the tail. So this is a beauty of it.
Now, one thing, that is absolutely right. But one thing that frequently happens with this particular type of hawk is because it's so boldly patterned, dark and white. What jumps to people's minds a lot of time is osprey, and because of the white head,
snowy owl.
And how boldly patterned it is. And it is not an osprey. An osprey always has the black mask. So this bird has a clean white head.
That's
and the location, Oklahoma, is also a good clue, which is epicenter for this subspecies of red-tailed hawk, which is Kreider's red-tailed hawk.
The Great Plains has so many cool hawks, and the whole western part of the continent is. We in the east are really, we don't get it as good with red-tailed hawks as they do out west. But yeah, this is such a cool Kreider's subspecies of red-tailed hawk. There's almost no color other than the black and the white. It's like a red-tailed hawk in grayscale. So some of the clues that we would use to identify red-tailed hawk are not there. Like, for instance, the red tail and the belly band is frequently absent, or at least very pale in this species as well.
And but one of the things that we see that is a clue for eastern red-tailed hawks is the white sort of V on the scapulars. They very frequently have this white V on the back when you see the bird like this, and we can see that this bird has that.
You can see that bird has it. Yep.
And now there's another picture of this bird, and we can see it's got the white undersides, and it's just very, very pale. But the other, key mark of red-tailed hawk, which we talk about a lot in What's This Bird when people put pictures of soaring hawks, is the dark patagial, which is the arrow pointing there to the dark mark on the underside of the leading edge of the wing. And so that, again, is another, really good clue that this is a red-tailed hawk, because there's really not very, I think ferruginous hawk can kind of maybe show something like that, but not quite.
Ferruginous hawk is a very pale Great Plains hawk that occasionally shows up in as far east as Oklahoma. I think it's somewhat regular in Oklahoma. There's one in Missouri right now. And that's sort of an unusual bird that far east. But there's a couple other things on this bird that you can see that are sort of more conventional red-tailed hawky. A lot of times in Kreider's hawk, that belly band that we point to in a lot of red-tailed hawks is very absent, as I said. But you can see when its wing is outstretched here, you can see a little bit of it. The kind that that belly band goes all the way around the flanks onto the underwing. You can see a little bit of it here, and also you can even see a little bit of the red tail.
You can see a little tinge of
when
red.
When the light is hitting it right, you can see that this is indeed a red-tailed hawk. Kreider's hawk is really cool. They show up in the east from time to time, but it's really hard to tell them from just plumage like red tails with plumage abnormality, which it was just sort of what they are. But where I grew up in Missouri, we'd see them every once in a while.
Yeah.
And ferruginous is we're talking about shape and structure a lot. Ferruginous is a beautyo, but it's like really, if you go back to the picture before, I don't know if you can. Ferruginous is super shouldery.
Yeah, there we go.
And a big flat head too. So it's like a bulked up version of red-tailed hawk.
Yeah. So this, a ferruginous hawk would. I didn't have time to Photoshop one in there and didn't think of it actually, but yeah, what Nate said, it would have a bulkier head, and it's got a really big mouth because they swallow prairie dogs basically whole. So they have this big gape that goes back way under the eye, and it just gives the bird a really different look. So we're going to get back to our our last bird here, and you were talking about structure, and structure is key on this one. Can you see that one yet, Nate?
I can see it. The
Okay,
Georgia bird,
the
the
Georgia bird,
Georgia
yes.
finch. Is it a finch? It's a finch. So
Yeah,
yellowish birds in Georgia. The one that always gets people confused is pine warbler because it
yes.
is so variable and frequently common year round. Will come to suet feeders a lot of times. People in the winter especially. But this is not a warbler, although it does have a kind of a longer bill. The base of the bill is much too thick for a warbler, whereas a
Right.
warbler would be more or less the same width of the bill along the entire length of the bill. Maybe narrows right at the tip. This guy is very thick at the base and narrows equally all the way down the length of the bill, which
But
makes me think of finch more than a warbler.
yeah, and what's going on here is, this bird doesn't look quite like anything in any of the field guides,
Yeah.
because it's been bathing and it's all fluffed up, and we can't
Mm-hmm.
see really what's going on. And if we look at
Yep.
the flank a little bit, we see what looks like to be a streak, a brown streak on there. Um, that gives us a good clue.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing to look at on this bird, as Nate said right away, is the bill. And the bill shape of pine siskin, which is what this is unique among our small birds. There is
Yeah,
nothing that has.
we had someone in the YouTube chat say goldfinch. I mean, you're heading in the right direction.
Yes.
Goldfinch and pine siskin very closely related. Pine siskin has the finch bill, as Greg. Please continue. I know that's the direction you're going with this thing.
Yeah. But it's
Compared to
the bill is long. It's long and very
yes,
pointed, and it's adapted for pulling seeds out of things like thistles and deep crevices. And it's a goldfinch bill is shorter and deeper. Taller, wider, deeper. It's not so acutely conical like this. So
yeah,
I said that when you get familiar with it, a pine siskin has a really uniquely shaped bill that always gives
very
it
different
away.
from other finches.
Even if
Yeah.
you can't see any of the plumage or anything, the bill shape. The only thing that we have in some parts of the United States, in the Northeast and in the western Great Lakes around Chicago and Wisconsin, European goldfinch has a similarly shaped bill, but there's no way that you could confuse the two of those. And most
Yeah.
people wouldn't even run across a European goldfinch. But European goldfinch, they're the teasel. They feed in teasel, where they have to get in and pull the seeds out of that monstrous seed head.
I was going to say, even in Georgia, they probably don't run into pine siskins every year. It's
Yeah.
an eruption year. This has been a huge finch superflight year. Their finches are starting to head back north, but there's still a lot of them around. Birders in Georgia, you don't run into a pine siskin every year. You'd be sort of confused if it comes out. You would see pine warblers every year, though.
Yep. So I think that is it for our birds today. We got a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions or
Yeah, shoot them at us. We're showing this on the What's This Bird Facebook group, also on YouTube and on Twitter, on Periscope. You can find us on @ABA on Twitter as well, and we're showing it there. A lot of people watching. Hello to all of you who are still with us. Thank you for hanging in there. If you have any questions about birds, bird ID, our thoughts on anything going on in the birding world, please drop us a line. We're happy to chat about it for a little bit further, a little bit longer. But in the meantime, if you enjoy these sorts of programs, please consider joining the American Birding Association. It's right there above Greg, and aba.org/join. We have a number of different memberships that may fit what you want. We have e-memberships if you would like to get your magazines online. We have some special deals with some partners that are coming out. I don't know if I can say it yet. I should have checked, but we have some good ones coming out soon that we'll be able to make available to everybody. And feel free to join
that
us.
is something that we don't, and that is something we don't talk about, and we don't really. It's sort of like this secret member benefit that we don't really talk about too much. and we should. So in addition to the magazine and everything else we do, and helping us do these broadcasts and everything else we do. Most of what the ABA does, we give away for free. But members also, you go into your member profile, and there's a section there on your member profile on our website that has discount codes to popular products and companies that are sponsors and partners with the ABA, and you can get some pretty good discounts with things like books and travel and all sorts of things.
Yep. Yep. ABA membership has lots of benefits. We do have a
A
couple
lot of
questions
benefits.
coming from
All right.
YouTube. YouTube is the hotbed for bird discussion today. Bridget Butler, a friend from Vermont, says, favorite winter finch moment from both of us this year. Greg, do you have a favorite winter finch moment this year? I do. I'll let you go first, though.
I don't, because my only winter finch this year was some semi-accidental red crossbills flying over.
It's not bad. Down here in North Carolina, there's a guy over in Chapel Hill who has been hosting, still is hosting, as far as I know, a massive flock of evening grosbeaks at his feeders. And he has this beautiful property in the woods that he has, his immediate area around his house. He's recreated with he's torn out all the invasives and planted native plants all over the place. And so he gets all these amazing birds. And so he's had this big flock of evening grosbeaks, and he's been hosting a lot of people who have come out to his house to see them. And so this early in the year, in order to get over my winter finch anxiety, I was worried that I was going to miss the whole thing. I decided just to bite the bullet and go over to his house and mask up and go out and stand in his yard and watch the grosbeaks come in. And it was pretty incredible. Lots. I mean, it was about a flock of about 50 of them. And alongside that, there were a number of purple finches, which are also having a good year down here. And, 300 or 400 pine siskins, which would like fly to the immediately below the feeders and like rummage around there like this moving carpet of birds. It was such a weird thing. But it was really cool. And I was stoked to see evening grosbeaks. It's a bird I hadn't seen since I was a kid, so it was good to touch base with them again. It felt like a life bird, even though it wasn't a real life bird, but it sure felt like one.
So in What's This Bird, Tyler Hodges asks if we have any thoughts on the redwing and fieldfare eruption in the Northeast.
Do I ever?
Are they? It's awesome.
It is, yeah. But also, if you go to birdcast.info, which is a really great website where they're trying to take all this eBird data and synthesize it with meteorological data and figure out what's going to happen. They've been talking about this since the beginning of the year. They were saying that there's this weather phenomenon called the North Atlantic Oscillation. And I could be getting this completely wrong, but it essentially means that there's this it's a giant pressure system in the North Atlantic. And if you look at the wind maps, what it effectively means is that there's this straight shot from the British Isles to the Maritimes. Like it's like a highway of wind. And
and also,
when they noticed this, they basically said, this looks good. Look for strong flying birds to make it over. And
yeah,
there we go. We've got
and also the
thrushes.
And yes, we did. And also, those two species in particular, I believe, just off the top of my head, are moving westward. They're breeding in Iceland and I believe Greenland. And are generally kind of headed this way.
Yeah, it's neat. I mean, it's just one of those things, if it maintains through the spring into the spring, I think it could mean like a lot of lapwings, similar sort of strong flying birds, but bar-tailed godwits, black-tailed godwits, northern lapwing, common shelduck, those sorts of things. Birds that are big and robust and can manage a North Atlantic crossing. Are the ones to watch out for, and the thrushes are the beginning of it. So maybe
wouldn't it be fun if there's a bunch of these birds around that just decide, hey, I like it here, start breeding. That sort of thing has certainly happened before.
Yeah, it'd be cool. We'll see, but it's pretty amazing. You think that there've already been 10 redwings in the ABA area in the last 2 months. Those are the ones we've found. So imagine how many are out there that we have not come across.
Yeah, and so I mean, there could be song thrush,
Yeah,
missile thrush.
yeah, gray lag
Scott
goose.
Heron. Scott
Minnesota.
Heron asks, has a request. Is there any chance we could feature an episode focusing on audio, especially with warbler season not too far away? Um, Audio is my biggest nightmare in doing this.
We'll have to do some. We'll have to
But we
play
will.
around and see. I think
We will.
theoretically it's possible. You know who would be good with that would be Ted. We'll have Ted Florida.
Ted would be great. The technical end of bringing in another audio source into this. Yeah, that's something we definitely have to do.
You notice that we were half an hour late today.
Yeah, that was because of
That's
an
the
audio
reason.
problem. And but we will use this for the first time, I believe, in 2021 to give a little shout out to our favorite app, Larkwire.
Ha!
So
We haven't done it. It's been a long time since we
it's been
mentioned
a
Larkwire,
while.
Greg.
It's been a while. Get over to larkwire.com and check out the app Larkwire, which is a game, a really, really cool little game that teaches you birdsong. And the way it works is awesome by grouping species that sound the same. So like robins and vireos and tanagers and things like that, and playing repetitions of different individuals. So it's not like the same exact one each time.
Yeah.
And you go through and guess which one it is. And by doing that, you really learn the similarities and the similarities and differences between the different species.
So I have a question coming from Periscope from @IL Warblers. I think that means Illinois Warblers. What is the typical spring arrival for prothonotary warblers in North Carolina compared to Chicago? Well, I'll tell you, we start getting prothonotary warblers down here in early April. First week or first 10 days of April is usually when they start arriving. They'll peak later in that month, and then you'll see them wherever you've got marshy woods, which is pretty common down here.
Yeah, they're in the Chicago area. They are earlier migrants as well. Mid-April is when they show up, and late April, early May is when they're at their peak migrating. And they're establishing territory out by the middle of May, when most of the other warblers are already are just moving through.
Yeah, exactly. I would expect the difference between where I live and where Greg lives in terms of when birds arrive, it'd be about 10 to 14 days difference for breeding birds. Any other questions? Please let us know. Let me take a little once over around. Yeah, Larkwire, yay! We have a comment. It's good. It's expensive for an app, but you'll end
It
up
is
using
worth
a
it.
lot.
It is absolutely worth it.
One time you spend it one time.
One time.
You're buying stuff on Amazon anyway. What's an app on those?
I don't even know what it costs now. Is it $9 or
I think it's
$15
like
or something like that? I'm not sure.
I don't
but
know.
It's
It's been a
absolutely
couple
worth
years. I don't know if they've changed
Yeah.
it or not since I bought it. Yeah. So let's see. We're coming up at 3:00.
We are.
We're at the end. If you catch
I gotta
us real
come up.
quick,
We gotta have John come up with some exit music for us. Yeah, something like one of the news shows. Bum, 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 bum.
Yeah. Well, we're about finished here. Once again, join the ABA if you like. We'll be back in a couple weeks to do this again. Trenton Voitko asks, do either of us have spark birds? You have a spark bird, Greg?
Red-breasted nuthatch.
It's a good one. White-eyed vireo is mine. That I guess. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to come up with one. When you start birding, everything comes so fast. It's hard to find one bird that like just really puts you over the edge. It was kind of a avalanche into it, and everything was amazing.
Mia McPherson thanks us for overcoming the technical difficulties, and thank you guys for being patient and sticking around while we dealt with that, and hanging in there.
Leela wants to go birding in Ohio. That's within a day's drive at the end of the month.
At the end of March,
February into March
end
is
of
still
February.
pretty slow. It's still a rough time of day.
Yeah, that's tough.
If anyone has any suggestions for Let her know in the comments. I don't know Ohio very well, but I know that we
Yeah, I
usually
don't
have
either.
Ohio birders around. But we'll catch you in a couple weeks. Thanks everybody. Adios. Join the ABA. Have
Yep.
a good spring. Stay
See you next
warm.
time.
Stay healthy. Bye. All right, cool.